everything you listed costs money, transportation and all these supplies, like digital supplies. I mean, that has to come from somewhere, which will be taxpayers' money.
Right. So Melissa's asking, hold on, you're still using taxpayers' money, you're just using it in different ways. Well, the problem now is that the schools get this money and they have to use it up in their budgets in order to justify their budgets for the following year. Okay, so you don't get an economies of scale when you give people vouchers. The school has to compete for that money, and so if they're able to educate a child for, let's say, $4,000 a year per student, and the voucher $7,000 a year, they have a surplus. That surplus can then get put back into the school, or pay higher teacher salaries, or offset free lunches. And then you basically say to the school, what is your surplus? And all right, well, our voucher is going to be dropped. It's going to put an incentive on the school to be more economically, conscious. Now it's sort of like, well, we had 10,000 last year, we need 11,000 this year. There's no incentive for them to keep any of their money. If they keep their money, they lose it in the budget. So what you're trying to do is to be competitive, and they look to lower their costs at the school, increase their amount of money they're getting from their voucher, and hopefully there's a savings to the school, which allows them to build a surplus. If they build a surplus, then they can use that to offset any additional costs or to reinvest in the school. And then if there's a wholesale across the board cut, so there may have to be some adjustments in the transition. For example, if you're going to school that already has smart boards or computers, because when it was built it had those, the voucher to that school will be less than the voucher that goes to maybe a lower income inner city school that hasn't been improved. So for example, if you had a $7,000 per student in a small city, if it was going to a school that had multiple and already had an improvement and larger, well, there you go. I think also it could be used to make the schools smaller, so that you start developing community schools again. And we've gone to a prison model of education, which and you're laughing, but that's how we do it. They're huge. They're the same model that we use to build prisons is the same model we use to build schools. You have a central location, you have security. That is not the way you educate kids, especially those who may have challenges in the classroom. So I think the smaller the school, the more manageable. And I think the city should basically go out and use their eminent domain powers to establish neighborhood schools, so that neighbors, kids, localities, they don't have to have a bus system to get there. They can get there by walking to the school. And that may mean you're actually tripling the amount of schools you have in the community, and you have to combine sports amongst those schools. But ultimately, it's creating a community-based education model. And I'm also in favor of splitting the sexes until a certain age group. Matter of fact, I'm in favor of splitting it all the way up, because I think it creates a social dynamic that's very difficult for teachers to manage while the kids are younger. And I think until they're at an age where they're basically young adults, it creates a significant problem for young men to be educated, because they typically suffer with more ADHD than women do, and young girls. So the model in the classroom may fit a young girl's learning style, but not a young man's style. So, I'm in favor of some of the programs that have used playgrounds and activities to teach young boys. And I think we have to be conscious that not everybody's going to fit the same mold. So they should be able to opt in and out as necessary. Some girls are not going to fit that mold. So you have to have programs in that model of separated sexes, so that it modifies as necessary. But right now we have no incentive except bigger, and more testing. Because if let's say I've got 1,500 kids in a school, how do you educate them in a way that's manageable? Well, I have to use multiple choice. I have to use tests. I can't spend a lot of time talking to every student. So it's the same problem we've got in healthcare now. The doctors don't spend any time with their patients. You don't spend any time with your teacher. And they need time with their teacher. So how do you do that? You create smaller class sizes. How do you do that? You create smaller schools. How do you take the pressure off parents and students to be able to get back and forth to school? You put them in the community. And so this sort of institution-based model of education is a horrific idea. We don't use that model on anything else. I mean, if we talk about entrepreneurial leadership with businesses, we talk about teams and networks. We don't do that. So here's what's really screwed up. So now what we're doing now is we're taking charter models, or what I call elite students, and we're putting them inside of public schools. So basically, all the trolls can just basically be left out in the cold, and you got this elite based. Now that worked for me in school because I was one of those kids, but that doesn't help us educate our populace. Okay, what it really does, it creates class warfare, which I'm absolutely opposed to. Now, a lot of people didn't want to be in school because what was the point of studying Shakespeare if that's not what you're going to do? So I really believe in strong two-track system, okay? That you are either going to be a collegiate, professional, academics path, and that is decided not very early on, because I think some boys develop late than girls. I think you got to be conscious of that. But at some point, you've got to make a decision of which way you're going to go. And if you're going into a non-academic setting, you are basically getting prepared to work in the world. You have an understanding of car maintenance. You have an understanding of finance. You have an understanding of online banking. You have an understanding of mortgages. All the things that when you get out in the world, you go, okay, I know how to fill up my car with gas. I know how to maintain my car. I know how to. Those are practical skills that a lot of kids don't get until after college. It's a mistake. They should have those before they get out of high school. And there should be a public-private partnership to where if you've got a local business who can train kids, you're taking them right from high school, training them in a particular business. So if you are in a funeral parlor and that's something you want to do, you're going right into that. So you work and you go to school, you get your basics. So what's happened to us is in the United States is our technology has exceeded our educational model. We're in the 21st century with technology and in the 1950s model of educating our kids. And what we're hoping to do is we'll pick it up in college. Well, that's a really expensive way to catch up, and it's not working out. People are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on education, making minimum wage when they get out of college. So, and the question is, well, y'all should just get more jobs. Well, there's nothing to get, okay? So you have to create your own job, you have to create your own possibility, and if your mind is stuck in this sort of A, B, C, D mentality, it's really hard to be creative. I also think that we have to reinstitute the emphasis on the arts. That's been kicked out of most schools now, and I think that is a horrific mistake, and that's got to be a part of every young person's education and I think a functioning society, an appreciation for music and for art. And what's happening now is that is only being left for the elite kids. Lower income, inner city kids never get any value of that. They don't see any application of that. So they don't really strive to anything other than repeating the same thing they've known. So that model's got to change, and it's going to take some significant fight against the teachers union for them to understand they're losing income and they're losing all sorts of benefits because they won't let a more competitive system in place. Not everybody who is, doesn't know what to do in their life should be a teacher, frankly. So we have to kind of flip it on our head and say the best and the brightest should be teachers. And if you're not that smart, maybe you should go play football. But if you're really smart, you shouldn't just think, oh, okay, I'm going to go to Wall Street and try to make as much money. You should say, I can make a great living being a teacher and be competitive. So most teachers have no concept of the economic pressures on their school systems. They just worried about getting paid and having their summers off. Well, okay, that doesn't work. It's not working.
Well, they don't have an incentive financially yet.
None.
So that's why a lot of them, I feel like, that even the good ones get reverted to that state of mind.
Well, it's a communist idea, right? Mm-hmm. The more you work, the less you get. Mm-hmm. And the more you work, the more the system's willing to take from you. Every teacher I know pays thousands of dollars out of their pocket for their kids. How is that possible? Yeah. It's ridiculous. Do you know, my first year I taught for years. I know something of what I'm talking about. I was 22 years old. I taught remedial English and creative writing, okay? First of all, the seniors that I taught were more mature than I was, which was scary, and they shouldn't have never allowed some of those kids in that classroom because they were already grown. They were 22 years old or something. I made $18,700 a year as a teacher in a rural high school, okay? That is not a professional salary of any shape or form. And I was responsible for over 110 kids. So break that down, okay? It doesn't make any sense. Now, they also wanted me to sponsor and participate in every club after school. They wanted me to help security in the cafeteria, of which I tackled at least 3 or 4 kids the year I was there who were fighting. They wanted me to help with security on the hall. Okay, so that's an experience I had, and the teachers there told me, "Mr. Hall, you got to get out of here. Don't stay here. It's not worth doing. You're not going to ever be fulfilled." And I love to teach, but there was no incentive for me to teach. But they were willing for me to stay after hours, and I said, "Listen, I'm making literally $5 an hour. $5 an hour is what I was making." And we're not even talking about the grading outside of school. We're talking about just the amount of extracurricular activity. So we've got a real backwards mentality when it comes to, and I think what's happened is the Republicans of old have taken a sort of this powerful institutional model of prisons. And what's happening in a lot of our young men is we've taken them from a prison structure in school to an actual prison out of school. And if you want to see that breaking down, just I would challenge everybody to go to a local jail where 90% of those are African American men between the ages of 18 and 45 years old. No society can function when you have a large group of people who are under control of the government. It just doesn't work. It creates such negative consequences to a community. So what's happening, and I'm opposed to it, is we have a most egregious form of segregation now, which is economic segregation. And we have that in Chesapeake. We have literally segregated this city into 2 parts, a white section of the city and a black section of the city, and that is based on economic principles. The way to do that is not to damage those who are trying to get out of an inner city problem. It is to help the inner city. They're very able to help themselves. So, but we cannot continue to spend $120 million on a brand new school in the suburbs while the other schools are lacking in basic necessities, computers. I mean, not even that, lunches, okay? There's no way in the world a kid should be going to school and not getting a lunch. That is so minuscule in the sense of the amount of the budget. So, yeah, you don't need to have a $3,000 smart board in your classroom. It's not necessary. You don't need it. It doesn't add to the educational value. You shouldn't have it. It's the dumbest thing in the world. You don't need to have everybody with a laptop. Here's the deal. Just learn how to stinking read. There you go, okay? You can get a digitized book and put it on the screen. That's all you need, right? And the other thing that's funny to me is we're going to all this technology. Most inner city kids don't have access to the internet. So what is the point of them doing research on the internet? They don't have a computer at home. Oh, and by the way, the public libraries don't have enough funding to get computers for them to go to it because that's been shut down. So now basically what you have is kids who cannot perform in school because the technology has outpaced their economics. And when that happens, you create a class warfare that is very detrimental. So I think what we should do is just build more prisons, right? That's a great plan. And in essence, what we're doing is we're incarcerating a whole generation. And it will come back to bite us. It will come back to haunt us. And it already is. So we got to have some leadership at the state and the federal level that's got enough guts to do something about it too, because it's not working. So I think TED Ed is a great way too. If you check that out, there's a great ideas on TED Ed on how to fix it. And so, but it's chronic. It's a chronic problem. So, thanks. Bye.